Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Rap fire, math table, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, setting ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of the Maple Pill. This is another special episode of the Maple Pill, part 3 of a multi-part series, where we're really just exploring exactly how much did COVID cost us as Canadians. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, and this one, I'm really looking forward to this episode. This is the top 10 questionable government decisions when it came to spending around COVID-19. Now, first of all, I want to be honest and transparent with you guys. There was a lot of stories competing for my top 10. I imagine I maybe overlooked or forgot a few as well. So let me know what should have been in the top 10 that I missed out on. Because there's lots of things that could have came in here that I didn't, right? I believe there was $82 million related to the Treasury Department and essentially how they were going to spend that money to try and inform individuals to get their vaccination. I think there was some ventilators, if I'm not mistaken, that we bought that we never ended up using. There's lots of different suppliers that we ended up giving money to that, you know, didn't deliver on the deadline they were supposed to. A few of them went bankrupt even. Again, lots of stories that I just couldn't, you know, squeeze into the top 10. I also wanted this to be kind of representative and highlight the different types of government, you know, misspending, graft, and grift that occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then one other, you know, qualifying statement here is understand, you know, there's still an opportunity for them to waste more money in the future. And we covered in part 2 of this video series how the government was very unwilling to be transparent in regards to their spending. You know, they tried to obfuscate and, you know, make it difficult and redact as much as they could when it came to the government spending, because it's put us in, you know, unprecedented deficits. We're literally, you know, spending 350, maybe even more $billion per year right now on COVID-19. We just surpassed over $1 trillion in government deficit as well for the first time ever. Not a milestone we should be proud of. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack here when we're talking about Canada's COVID-19 response and all the crazy expenses and costs associated with it. Again, this isn't talking about mental health. This isn't talking about the cost on the children. This isn't talking about any of the economic impacts around COVID policies, right, to small businesses in particular. This is literally just looking when the government was cutting checks, how they chose to spend that money and some of the terrible ways in which they chose to spend that money. But enough of my preamble, because we've got a lot to cover in this episode. So let's jump into it. And, you know, number 10 is Catherine McKenna used COVID-19 sole source contract to hire consultants. Just diving a little bit deeper into this Rebel News article, one of the consultants hired by McKenna was Drew Fagan, Greenbrook Consulting Limited, which oversaw the Toronto Pan Am Games. As the contract played out, Fagan wrote op-eds in the Globe and Mail and the Hill supporting the Liberal Party of Canada without disclosing his $100,000 COVID contract. If you guys want to see all the sole source contracts, it's actually here. I think there's like, if I'm not mistaken, like literally hundreds of pages, or 64 pages, I guess, Rebel News here shared in regards to sole source contracts from the federal government. You know, if you guys want to play at home, I encourage you to spend some time, go through these pages and look for other fishy, you know, spending decisions made by our federal government and, you know, our political elites. But again, Catherine McKenna spending $100,000 on a contractor who then wrote op-ed pieces in Canadian newspapers without disclosing the fact he was getting paid, and yet he was pushing and promoting, you know, the federal government and Liberal Party's decisions and reactions to everything with their COVID policies. Next, from Blacklock's reporter, number 9, pay TV personalities for praise. So federal departments and agencies last year spent more than $600,000 on payments to tweeters, bloggers, and other social media influencers. Records show local celebrities, including a CBC TV Dragon's Den personality, were hired to praise government's work. So, you know, the government took $600,000 of our money to give to celebrities so celebrities could talk about how awesome the government is. Seems legit to me. Again, link to this story as well as all the stories I'm going to share with you guys tonight in the video description down below. don't let this episode of the Maple Pill be the end of your fact-finding journey. Let this really just be the springboard or jumping off point where you go and start doing your own due diligence. But again, really encourage you, check out this Blacklock's Reporter story, because it's interesting to see exactly where the $600,000 went and to what celebrities and why. Next, COVID app, and again, this is from Blacklock's Reporter number 8. COVID app was 16.5 million flop. So barely 2% of Canadians infected with COVID reported the fact using a costly federal tracing app, says the Public Health Agency. Only a fifth of mobile subscribers downloaded the app in the first place, despite repeated appeals by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But again, no big deal here for the government, right? Because they eventually just went and gave TELUS, I think it was over $200,000, just to give us, or to give them, all of our phone information, because the Public Health Agency wanted it, despite the fact that, I believe it was not an ethics committee. What was it? It was, anyways, another committee in Parliament said unanimously, no, you shouldn't be doing this. But Public Health Canada said, we don't give a shit. We're going to do it anyways. But again, they did also spend $16.5 million on this app that essentially achieved nothing. And I understand why it achieved nothing. Why would someone want to willingly participate in the government tracking their moves, right? Why would you want Big Brother to have more information on you willingly? Makes no sense to me. Now, moving to story number 7, COVID has already cost us billions. Tyler Shandro defends 3 million vaccine lottery. So there's a little bit of an asterisk on story number 7 here. This is technically the Alberta government, but I think this is just a great representation in general of the waste that we saw in Canada related to COVID-19 spending. So Premier Jason Kenney announced the Open for Summer lottery over the weekend, which will hand out 3 $1 million cash prizes to Albertans who have received or have signed up for at least one dose of the coronavirus vaccine. Again, literally paying people or offering a lottery if you would get the jab or shot. That's where at least $3 million of our tax dollars went, at least for our Alberta brethren. $3 million lotto for the vaccine. Money well spent, I'm sure. Now, story number 6, COVID furniture cost $36 million. Federal agencies spent more than $36 million on new desks, chairs, and other equipment to have employees work from home, according to records. The Department of Public Works said it was not a waste of money. I'll leave it to you guys. Do you think that this is appropriate for me to put as number 6? I personally think it is. $36 million on COVID furniture. It's not an insignificant dollar amount. Next, story number 5 from CBC News. In Ottawa's rush to buy PPE, companies with little or no experience got some of the biggest contracts. And we could actually do an entire deep dive just around this story, because this is worth really exploring. I really encourage you guys, go deep on this one and check out this CBC News article, as well as check out other articles related to this. But government says first-time PPE supplier that received $371 million contract delivered the goods. So again, understand. Actually, let me just get into it here. The federal government awarded a $371 million contract to secure personal protective equipment, one of the largest medical supply deals in its history, to a small company headquartered in a house in suburban Ottawa that had no apparent prior experience in PPE procurement. So here's a list of all the different countries that made out like bandits around this. And I guess what I want to highlight from this, isn't that companies shouldn't be able to pivot during a pandemic and make money from it. I think they should. But what's interesting is how this company was able to pivot. And based upon my cursory research, this company, as well as other companies that got these massive contracts that had never previously participated in PPE. And again, most of these companies were just sourcing from China or other countries, and a lot of them were just spending our own money to get us the shit, right? So like, it's not like they were manufacturing. It's not like they were improving Canada's supply chain. One story involves a PPE supplier just paying $800,000 to like rent the biggest plane possible to ship over gowns from Asia to Canada. So again, like essentially they're just making markups as middlemen here. I honestly don't understand why we approached it this way, other than I think the government just wanted to announce they were doing something. again, really encourage you guys, do a deep dive on this CBC News article. Maybe I'm, jumping to conclusions or being unfair in regards to how the government approached this one, but I personally don't see a strong justification for it. And again, just having someone be like cutting almost a blank check to someone and being like, pay whatever is necessary to get it done. And then us clapping them on the backs as being heroes and helping save Canada is just bizarre. So again, this is part of CBC's The Big Spend series of articles. If you guys really want to go down the deep dive and see how government arguably, I'm going to argue strongly for it, mismanaged our spending around COVID-19, that's a good jumping off point, is that series of articles. But again, just fascinating. And that is our story number 5 here. So story number 4, 82 million budget item, a mystery. This is from Blacklock's reporter. The Treasury Board says it does not have a single document, email, or memo explaining an 81.9 million budget line item to promote vaccinations in the public service. Board President Mona Fortier could not explain the cost when questioned earlier in comments. Conservative MP Kelly McCauley, Edmonton West, earlier said the figure appeared exorbitant. Treasury Board officials told us it was for rapid testing purchases and distribution. McCauley told the Commons December 9th. The Treasury Board website shows there are 3,400 unvaccinated employees seeking accommodation. That works out to about 24,000 per employee for rapid testing. How does the government justify this? Yeah. Again, a lot of these stories are just representative of government mismanagement of spending around COVID-19. There may be instances where some of these stories have been updated and a little bit more transparency was made available, and maybe we get a better understanding of exactly what was going on. But for the most part, I haven't seen a lot of updates or revisions around these stories, and I try and keep an eye on it just through my daily episodes of the Maple Pill. And it should be extremely concerning for us as Canadian citizens to see ourselves in our country for the first time $1 trillion in debt, unprecedented spending, unprecedented, unbalanced budgets, and to really have no clear goal or destination on the horizon where we can see, okay, better fiscal days are ahead of us, right? Right now with the Liberal NDP coalition that's being rolled out and all the new promises they're making to the social safety net, things like dental care and pharmacare and things of that nature, again, they may be noble initiatives, but understand there's going to be more costs associated with that when we're already at an unprecedented level of spending, right? The only way we're ever going to be able to balance our budget without completely destroying our country or economy is through austerity. And right now, we are not on the right trajectory there. We're spending more and more. It's honestly wild. Go back to episode number 2 if you guys want to just see a breakdown of what we're spending. But it's a lot of money. Different estimates put it at $1.5 billion a day, potentially just spent around Canada's federal reaction to COVID-19. Blacklock's reporter, story number 3 here. Failed contractor was solid. So the Department of Health in internal emails rated a failed contractor as solid even after its COVID test kits failed clinical trials. Spartan Bioscience, Inc. received $16.6 million cash advance for rush orders of test kits never delivered before it filed for bankruptcy court protection April 6th. The email was sent a day after Spartan Kits failed trials at the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg. Tests were conducted weeks after Spartan was awarded a $273,928 federal research grant and a $149 million contract for test kits. The Prime Minister's office in May 3rd, 2020, staff emails agreed the Spartan contract remained solid. Spartan executives earlier had a couple of good meetings with the Prime Minister's office, wrote staff. So again, this is worth reading from cover to cover. Go get a paid subscription to Blacklock so you guys can go down this rabbit hole. But Spartan's bankruptcy court filings indicated the Ottawa-based company owed creditors $73 million, including $16.5 million from the health department and $8.8 million owed to the Business Development Bank. Again, the deeper you look into the creditors owed here, it turns out it's almost all government agencies, right? Like another almost $10 million to the Ontario Health, $8.7 million to University of Laval, the government of Manitoba for $1.65 million, and yet somehow the Prime Minister's office believed that this company was solid, despite the fact that they were up to their debt or up to their eyeballs in debt, and most of that debt was already to government agencies. This should have been something that could have been easily understood, and there's no reason we should have just accidentally given them $16.6 million as a cash advance to only have them go bankrupt right afterwards. There should be serious consequences to this sort of financial mismanagement. Story number 2 from CBC News. 2 Ontario LTC operators got $157 million in COVID aid. They also paid $74 million to shareholders. So Extendicare Inc. and Sienna Senior Livings Inc. say public money spent on COVID-19 efforts, not dividends. But understand that, again, even if they spent all that money, why did the government give them so much money if they had such a surplus that they were able to distribute $74 million to shareholders? Shouldn't there be a bit of a give and take there in that relationship? Should Canada always be on the line? Essentially, at this point in time, it's hard to not view what's played out through COVID-19 as essentially there's privatization of profits, and yet any sort of deficits, right, or losses are then made public, right? We're in this era now where the Canadian taxpayer seems to be on the line for all these crazy commitments the Canadian government has made, and Canada just keeps printing more and more money, issuing more and more debt, and just throwing money around in the hopes that it'll make the federal Liberal Party look like they care about what's playing out with COVID-19, regardless of the actual consequences to our economy, to our long-term future as a country, and to just our ability to operate, right, financially. Like, we are mortgaging our entire future at this point in time. If we don't do a strong course correction in the extreme near future, I don't see how we're ever going to get out of this debt. Again, let me know. Do you see the silver bullet that I'm overlooking that's actually going to get us out of this $1 trillion in debt? And it's actually $1.2 trillion now, right? Again, we've never been $1 trillion in debt. And in the last 2 years, not only did we hit the $1 trillion, but we're now at almost $1.2 trillion with no sign of it easing up in the near future. And again, as we see more spending initiatives coming out of the Liberal NDP coalition, it's going to get worse. Like, your children are going to be beholden or enslaved essentially by the central bank and by the Canadian government through all these crazy financial commitments. I don't know how else to frame it, to be honest. But again, if you guys want to check out this CBC News article, link in the video description down below. And now, number 1, questionable government spending decision during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've talked about this multiple times on the Maple Pill in the past, but it's worth revisiting. The field hospitals, right? We literally spent hundreds of millions of dollars on these field hospitals between 2 suppliers, and we've never used one of those field hospitals. And it turns out no one really even asked for those field hospitals. First article here is from Blacklock's reporter from January 6, 2022. Seek full account on Lavalin. Again, SNC Lavalin. Where have we heard that company before? And wait, weren't they involved in maybe some scandals with the Justin Trudeau's government and him, going to bat for them? I'm sure that's just a crazy coincidence. The Department of Public Works yesterday faced demands for a full accounting of emergency field hospital equipment contracted through SNC Lavalin Group, Inc. One MP questioned the whereabouts of 200 hospital bids, complete with ventilators and self-contained generators, bought as backup for overcrowded intensive care units. So again, we want to know what results Canadians got for the $150 million contract to SNC Lavalin that was supposedly to provide emergency response facilities in the event of a surge in cases, Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre yesterday told reporters. The contract was awarded April 9th, 2020 without public notice to other bidders. And this is one of the biggest concerns around all this government spending, is how many of these contracts appear to be sole sourced. As in, there was no competitive process, as in, essentially, the administration and the federal Liberals just picked their favorites and said, hey, here's a shit ton of money, go do something. And maybe you think I'm being bombastic, but I think the further you look into this shit, the more you're going to realize that, oh, no, Matt's not being bombastic. He's actually just saying it how it was. So another article from Blacklock's reporter, no need for $150 million contract. Public health authorities never asked for $150 million field hospitals ordered from SNC Lavalin Group, Inc. The Commons Government Operations Committee was told yesterday no province asked for the mobile units either. None have been used to date. The contract was awarded April 9th, 2020 without public notice to other bidders. The department awarded SNC Lavalin $26 million in an advance cash payment for a total of 5 field hospitals that remain warehoused. Again, this is worth going deep down that rabbit hole. Link all these Blacklock's reporter articles in the video description down below. But understand that there's been other companies as well that received contracts similarly around these field mobile hospitals. So this is from the Globe and Mail. Mobile hospitals that cost Ottawa $300 million sit in storage while Omicron strains Canada's healthcare. This was from January 14th, 2022. So again, if you just want to go further down it, see who else other than SNC Lavalin made out like a bandit based upon our taxpayer money, because the government just wanted to at least have the appearance like they were doing something, regardless of whether Public Health Canada or regardless of whether individual provinces wanted these field hospitals. We spent an inordinate amount of money on them, right? And understand, when we actually look at where we are today as Canadians in regards to our healthcare infrastructure, we're really no better off than we were 2 years ago. And yet we spent hundreds of millions of dollars on field hospitals. We've spent billions and hundreds of billions of dollars on our response to COVID-19. And yet our infrastructure is no better for it. Are we ever going to hold these politicians, the administration, accountable for it? Or are we just going to move on to the next thing in the news cycle? We've already committed over $1 billion to Ukraine now. Let's just focus on Ukraine, right? Politicians and the mainstream media have a new toy to play with, a new headline to play around. So why should we really get caught up in trying to hold them accountable for the last fiasco? But this financial fiasco is unlike any other financial fiasco we've ever experienced in Canada. But again, these were just my top 10 questionable government decisions around COVID-19 spending. There's a lot of stories I didn't have a chance to cover here because I wanted to keep it from just being an infinitely long episode of the Maple Pill. Let me know what should have been in the top 10. What stories did I overlook? What stories did I misremember or did I not represent here? Because there's a lot more stories out there. Again, we haven't talked about all the crazy contracts around ventilators that were never used. There's a lot of government spending that's going on today, has gone over the last 2 years, and the government cannot do an adequate job of explaining to us where all that money went, why that money had to go to those places. That should concern every one of us because there is consequences to this spending. Money just doesn't grow on trees. And while you can just print it into existence essentially through, central banking, there are consequences to that as well. And we're starting to see the price of that through inflation here in Canada. Inflation is going to continue to be a more and more serious topic, and hyperinflation or stagflation are not out of the question. And this should concern all of us as Canadian citizens because, again, we've spent unprecedented amounts of money without any real results to show for it, without improving our infrastructure in any way. And presumably at some point in time, we're still going to have to improve that infrastructure. So here we are. It's not pretty, but I think this is the realist version of the truth I can present to you guys at this point in time. I have no doubt that over the coming days, weeks, months, years, and maybe even decades, that more scandals, more questionable spending will come to light. So this is just, at this moment in time, the top 10, in my opinion, questionable government decisions when it came to COVID-19 spending. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions in that comment section. If you like what I'm doing here with the Maple Pill, if you'd like more special episodes of the Maple Pill, let me know in that comment section, as well as smash the like button. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. I would really love to get to 1,000 subs before, Big Brother deletes me and I'm thrown down the memory hole of YouTube. So, just throw a guy a sub. And if you guys want more Matt McKeever in your life, you can check me out, Matt McKeever Unfiltered on Instagram. I essentially just share a lot of memes that, make fun of the woke narrative, the mainstream media, the government narrative, all that jazz. But again, this is just where we are today. If we don't change our trajectory, it's only going to get worse from a government deficit standpoint. At some point in time, that bill is going to come due, and it's either going to be us or future generations that are going to have to pay for it, and it's going to be a very painful process. We can try and fix the trajectory now, or we can just give up. But, do we really want to give up on Canada? All right, enough of this. Appreciate you guys. Be back tomorrow. And, I appreciate you guys watching, but it's more important now than ever before that we all speak out, that we start holding government accountable for their decisions and spending, because there are serious consequences to this. All right, thanks, guys.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Red fire, math, evil scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take